The party faces off against Jealousy, who nonchalantly slams the ground with his staff. An earthquake begins to reverberate as countless limbs reach out through the ground. Surrounded by an army of the undead, he introduces himself as Richmond, who had served the demon kingdom for 200 years. Having worked as the king's direct chancellor for half his life, he was the highest-ranking undead, a lich. He cannot die as long as the phylactery containing his soul and power remains intact. He died once at the hands of the previous warrior, and by the time he returned, his king was long slain. As a genius sorcerer, he learned that he was defeated by the warrior's light attribute magic. Thus, he set off to find some way to imbue light tolerance to both himself and his army. The party wonders why they couldn't detect them at all. The Saintess used her holy magic on an undead only to heal it instead. Turns out Richmond himself is using holy magic via the temple's holy scripture. He and his army were faithful disciples of the temple for decades and had overcome their jealousy for the living. This makes the Saintess, who only followed the temple for a decade, pale in comparison. Quoting holy verses, Richmond explains their devotion and powers after turning to pure light. The Saintess, Angela, asks him to let them pass, but Richmond refuses to overrule the laws of Earth as he is a general of the Demon King. She puts up a holy barrier to stop the attacking undead, but they pass right through. Edward supports her, reminding her of how he protected her in the past and rekindling her feelings, finding her drive once more. Kim finally wakes up and plows through his foes using physical attacks. The party follows his lead, with the warrior using his holy sword to destroy them. Kim is determined to end things fast though, suddenly transforming into a complete dragon to incinerate the undead and take to the skies. With the party on his back and burning everything in the area mid-flight, Kim heads straight for the castle. The warrior notices Edward isn't panicked at all and asks him if Kim is a dragon. He denies it but refuses to reveal Kim's true identity as he's bound by oath. Edward states that Kim is unlike any other human and is dangerous enough to make the world his enemy, convinced Kim is a shapeshifter. The warrior theorizes he is a doppelganger demon who turned on his own, or is a half-breed born from a human and demon. If this wasn't the case, he wonders if Kim is the monster of destruction, but denies it swiftly on account of Kim's contributions. The undead give chase, but the party arrives at the seemingly ordinary demon castle. They have 2 hours until the undead catch up, but the warrior realizes it's not enough time to slay the king and makes a request of Kim. Kim drops them off at the castle grounds and flies up again, taking out the foot soldiers with ease and buying time. He uses flammable fuel and his dragon fire to set things ablaze, leaving nobody to open the gates for the undead. Wondering if this was the dragon of Stuckfit, Richmond realizes his forces would only become firewood for the dragon within castle walls. Trusting Lust to protect the king, he prepares to take down Kim instead. Meanwhile, the party advances through the castle, but are stopped by Lust wielding a large concrete pillar. Lust, also known as Julius, is a powerful male demon with rippling muscles and is also an incubus. Incubi are mid-tier mage-type demons who seduce humans to steal their vitality, relying solely on magic to do so. As they are typically pretty boys and men, they don't develop much muscle. Now in possession of a hulking muscular body due to an incident 10 years ago, Lust uses brute force instead of magic against his foes. His flashback sequence is interrupted by the warrior, who charges straight at him. His brawny fist clashes with the holy sword, sending him flying into a wall. Thus was the abrupt end of the most powerful demon general, whose fate was inevitable. He did not take hostages, had the power of giant monsters, had advantage in his fights from a powerful army, so he was no match for the warrior in a one-on-one fair fight. Lust passes away, accepting his demise as the party advances into the throne room. Inside, the lone demon queen innocently calls out to Lust in response. Outside, Kim munches on something while overlooking the undead army. Jealousy is freaking out, wondering what Kim's doing and questioning his own decisions thus far. His cheeks bulging, Kim plunges down into the enemy horde. Jealousy uses fire resistance enhancements on his forces, but Kim just hurls out the flammable fuel on them instead. He then hurls out a little fire while Jealousy laughs, thinking the liquid is just poison. He is interrupted as his forces start exploding in every direction, with the power of around 30 fire breaths. As Richmond explodes, his phylactery shatters as well, finally killing him for good. As of now, no demon generals stand. Richmond and his undead army are utterly defeated. Kim wonders if he should eat the remaining corpses, but opts to go find leftovers in the castle instead. He enters the castle and eats all the fallen soldiers along the way, including Lust. He enters the throne room and is greeted by the sight of Edward and the warrior arguing, with the latter protecting the demon queen. Edward is furious, but the warrior insists that they must coexist instead. Kim demands an explanation, but the warrior thinks it's best to keep the truth from Kim for now. Edward informs him that the woman is the demon king and that his brother is abandoning his mission to slay her. The warrior asks Kim to listen, stating that the woman wasn't originally the demon king, but a soul from another world inhabiting the demon king's body. He used his lie detection skill to confirm her claims and fully believes her. Kim realizes she is the third person from Earth. While Eddie transmigrated or reincarnated as Edward, he was simply transported or transferred into this world in his own body. In the Demon King's case, his body was possessed by an Earth human. She used to be an ordinary office worker, preferring to read and collect military memorabilia on her own. She didn't take her Demon King position too seriously because it was a common trope in novels. Assuming she was in a dream, she casually implemented knowledge, systems, and concepts from Earth here, drastically overpowering the Demon Kingdom. Thinking of herself as a protagonist in a novel, she awaited the warrior's arrival. But now, her generals have all fallen for naught and she's finally awakened to the grim reality, begging for mercy. Kim breaks it down to her ordering her forces to wreak havoc and now surrendering out of fear. He asks the warrior if believes this nonsense, knowing full well it's all true. The warrior starts to cry, stating that too many lives were lost. In response, Kim and Edward approach him with grim expressions and Edward attacks his brother with his light sword. The warrior blocks it, but his holy sword shatters as the prince's blade pierces both him and the Demon Queen. A warrior must always be righteous, just, and good. However, Edward and Kim's ill wills have tampered with his qualities. By abandoning his quest, he lost his final quality of righteousness and is no longer a warrior. Edward points out this grim fact as he withdraws his sword. Horrified, Angela attempts to heal him, but Kim stops her, transforming into a snake and swallowing her whole. Days prior, Edward warns Kim about Angela's healing capabilities. Kim asks if Edward wasn't in love with her, which he accepts but is still unwilling to let her live. If his brother is no longer the warrior but alive, the throne goes to him. On the other hand, a priestess's healing power is a miracle which grants her immortality too. He instructs Kim to completely destroy her body by eating her, and Kim assures him that everything he eats doesn't go into his stomach, but somewhere else entirely. While he doesn't know where that place is, it's not physically connected to his body. In the present, Edward asks if Kim wants to eat the Demon King, but he declines. He brings up the matter of their wishes when a bright light shines and transports Kim into a separate space. Before him floats an ethereal cube with faces on each side, the goddess. It states that it is programmed to take on the form most ideal for its subject. But as Kim is outside the system's management bounds, it failed to do so. It formed and maintains this world via management of skills and status, creating monsters and supervising the reincarnation of souls. Kim asks why he was brought here. It explains that Earth is adjacent to this world and errors in the system cause these transfers. The monsters here were created after referencing beings from Earth as well. It's ready to grant Kim's wish and devoid of feelings, complementing the murder of the priestess and warrior. The warrior system was implemented to balance both societies via competition, but it led to a stagnation instead. Now the multiple races of mankind will battle for supremacy. All that sorted, Kim asks to be sent back to Earth. The goddess states that it cannot grant this wish as he is already having a huge impact on this world. He asks for a way to return on his own, but turns out Edward is already browsing said information. Kim cancels his request and inquires about creatures that transcend all. The goddess begins pumping loads of information into his brain, but these beings are still in development as they're beyond Elmwood's capabilities. It proposes to produce one now for Kim, but he decides to save his wish for later. In the meantime, he will consume all other existing creatures. He gets sent back alongside Edward, who is crying as the goddess and taken on Angela's form. Having gathered all the knowledge he needed amidst regret, he knows how to send Kim back as well. The Demon King's plan was actually large-scale reform. This in turn drastically improved the demon's combat power and endangered humanity. The capital fortress is under siege by a demon army, but is miraculously saved by Edward atop Kim in full dragon form. The king holds his head as his soldier reports on Edward's accomplishments. While his subjects are sweet-struck, the king is dumbstruck about his son controlling Dragon 2. He realizes he cannot deny Edward's feats anymore, but he knows he's just as cruel as himself. He concludes that Edward killed the warrior and priestess too, as his plans for returning his eldest son into a prince have disappeared as well. Most of all, he is plagued by the question of why Edward was not punished by the goddess. Now the priests are also supporting Edward, leaving him no choice but to accept him. Edward flew around Grand Canteen and slew all the demon forces. He then returns to Santo Onmaruz amidst unending cheers for a royal audience. After a brief chat, he parts ways with Kim and bids him good luck. Edward enters the throne room in his full glory, but the king still has his doubts. He places his sword in a knight's care and kneels before the king. He states that he learned the weight of the crown from his journey and slowly stands, light condensing in his hands as his sword returns to him. Thus, he boldly states that he's succeeding the throne now. Knights surround Edward, but he casually cuts them all down. The king predicted this and signals for his hidden assassins to take action, but nothing happens. He notices all his subjects are in a trance, affected by Kim's improved parasitic skills. While he cannot control his victims, Kim can manipulate their emotions and memories. By infecting the water supply, he brainwashed everything to empathize with Edward. Finally confronting his father for all the evil he's done, Edward stabs and kills him. He puts on the royal robe and crown as Kim breaks through the roof, killing an assassin. Edward officially becomes king amidst much applause, but he is haunted by his brother's ghost that night. Edward wished for knowledge in the purest form, where he learned his brother's last words as well: "Don't cross the line." He states that it's too late since he already conspired with Kim and destroys the ghost. In order to send Kim back to Earth, he must offer the heads of the elf, dwarf, hybrid, and lizardman kings at a shrine sealed within the temple's dungeons. And this would, without doubt, bring forth an age of war and chaos. If you guys want part 5, please let me know in the comments. Thanks.